Hello and welcome to the Long Dark Nights podcast. I'm Kirk.
And I'm Jitwire. Thank you all so very much for joining us. And today we also have a special guest. Please welcome Toastybits.
Hello there. Thank you for having me again.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. Also want to say hello to chat real quick. Hi, Elijah, Pickle, Faye, and Castle. How are all of you today? Lumbago.
Oh no, I'm sorry for that.
No worries
It's all right.
at all.
Dr. Frost is going to keep him under control.
Yep. Yep.
Good.
Yep. And before we get into the topic and all that, I just want to make sure everyone can hear us well. There's no crazy echoes or anything like that. And hi, I'll be the one. Good to see you. Sorry, I'm so excited to see someone else here. See one of our regulars. Okay, all good. Sounds good.
Why turned into an Autobot? Or
I
me?
did. Yep.
Yep, you're good now. And if
I'm better.
Toasty sounds a little off, it's because he's been feeling unwell, but he's managed to put himself together to be here with us to go through this topic. So if he gets quiet for whatever reason, it's probably because he's needed to mute, and we'll do our best to cover. So have some patience with the sick little piece of toast with us today.
With the
Yep.
bite in the corner. That's how
Yep.
put together I am at this point. So I will definitely be muting just to cough if I need to.
No worries.
Okay.
So to get this all started today, what the plan in this series is to go over basically the story mode as it sits as a precursor to what we hope will be the release of episode 5 relatively soon. So way we're going to do this today is we're going to kind of overview chapter by chapter and then allow you guys to ask questions or bring up topics and what have you, and we'll kind of make it an interactive deal. So with that, I'll get Toasty on start, and then if he needs to take a break here, we'll field questions from there.
All right. So I'm not muted, am I? Hopefully not.
No, you're good.
Yep.
Okay.
Can hear you.
So we're gonna start with we discussed this earlier. We're gonna talk about this in order of how it is intended to be played. So we're gonna start with that first cutscene in episode 1, which is very important. And if you look back at it after playing through the whole game multiple times, you'll notice, new details in episode 1 in the first cutscene that you might not have noticed before, alluding to Will and Astrid and their relationship and where things went to get them to where they are now. One of the key pillars of Wintermute is Will and Astrid's relationship and how they're dealing with that after they've been separated for so long. We don't really know if they're actually divorced or not. So we learned this later, so we'll get to that later in episode 3, why Astrid comes to see Will. But we eventually learn that she does it as a last resort, and she needs to get to Great Bear Island for a specific reason, and she's not telling him. And he asks her, questions, which is something that she didn't want him to do. And it does seem kind of, odd why she would want to go to this place that is more or less dead, and she's not willing to explain it. And that's where trust comes in. It's actually kind of a running theme in the game, but it's really just something that is important for games like this, where, it's a life and death situation. It's a survival world. You need to trust individuals in order to survive with them, or you've got to either get away from them or do away with them entirely. Mm-hmm. And you can very easily see how much Will and Astrid still trust each other after whatever they've gone through, after all that. So regardless of the inability to ask questions for why she needs to go, because it's such a huge ask, especially in the middle of a blizzard, he agrees to take her. And from there, they head off. So Will does the pre-check for the plane, which is pretty important, I imagine, making sure they're able to go. And they fly off to Great Bear. And that's like the first chapter. I think the second chapter starts in the second cutscene when they're in the plane. It's very weird how they structure some of these chapters. Some of them are just cutscenes. Some of them are fights with giant bears. To death.
Yeah, right.
Very long-winded deals.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of missable details in these first few cutscenes about their relationship. And if you go through it all, you can piece together that they certainly went through some tumultuous events, some trauma even, in their time together, and even potentially the loss of a child. And if you look at the screenshot or the thumbnail, I guess, for the stream, it's a shot from the opening credits of all Wintermute, and it shows a picture of Will and Astrid together. They're smiling, and there's a very particularly placed crack in the frame that covers something, and it most likely is their child. I believe it is confirmed to be male. I think Will mentions he at some point when he's talking with Astrid. I think he said, "I miss him," something like that.
Yeah.
And so I think from that and then later on in episode 1, when he's talking with Grandmother about her child, I think that more or less confirms they did have a child at some point, and they lost that child at some point. And that most likely led to
him and Grandmother were kind of like doing like a shared emotional memory between the two of them, with her and him, right?
I think that's very intentional for how Hinterland paired up certain characters for certain episodes. But yeah, that plane ride cutscene is very important because it does tell you that they both still have a lot that they need to discuss. Like they clearly needed to see a marriage counselor at some point, or just a counselor in general, or therapist or whatever.
I know it's very rare though, like whenever you lose a child in a marriage, it is very, very rare for the couple to be able to stay together, especially if they don't have any other surviving children.
Yeah.
So I know they kind of have that working against them too.
Yeah, because they're sitting there sharing information that they probably have never talked about before. They even both noticed how they still wear their wedding rings, which is rather odd. But I think that's like another sign that they needed to kind of talk it out before they made the decision that they made, which we still don't know if it was divorce or not. Let me clear my throat a sec.
While he's doing that, hello, Daniel.
Welcome. Hello, Daniel, and Grape Nut, and Koi, and Casual Zach. Thanks so much for joining us.
All right. Those first few cutscenes, which are the first 2 chapters, I think. I don't know why they did it like that. So weird. Really important, specifically about Will and Astrid and their relationship, and what we can hopefully speculate on for episode 5. I just see one question. Why was the Night of Astrid and Milton removed? Was it too graphic? Was that in the original Wintermute? I don't think so. I think we talked about this last time. The last time we met up. When we talk about this part of the game, we should talk about Predux and Redux, because this question from Castle is actually kind of relevant to that. I don't believe Astrid's perspective is shown in game at all in either version of Wintermute episode 1. So yeah, Predux and Redux is thrown around a lot, and when I talk about the lore, I try to avoid Predux almost entirely because I don't consider it canon unless it made it over into Redux. The Predux is the original release from August 2017. And then Redux is the remade version of episode 1 and 2 that they release a year later. The story for episode 1 is more or less the same from what I remember. I did find a movie of what is basically just the cutscenes and the dialogue put together from Predux. And yeah, episode 1 is more or less the same, but Grey Mother does offer more details. Like, they wanted her story to be a little bit more ambiguous. She never even mentions her husband in Redux. She doesn't mention Martin ever. But she just, I think I remember she has some pretty choice words about him in Redux and Predux, the original version.
Mm-hmm.
And then episode 2, Predux is actually quite different from Redux because they throw the bear spear into the mix. So instead of repairing the rifle, you're repairing the spear, and then the radio is like, for some reason, kind of like thrown at the very end, and it's all mysterious how, like, I almost said Methuselah, Jeremiah doesn't show Will the radio ever, and then at the very end they show him like sneaking into like a trap door in the cabin to grab the radio. I'm not too sure what they were going with that originally, because it does seem like they definitely rewrote the game to be completely different to what it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And also, Methuselah never shows up in Wintermute until the very end of episode 2.
Yeah, right in front of the dam. I remember that.
I have a theory for why that is. In the original, Will hits his head after fixing the rifle, and then he does all that with the bear, and then says goodbye to Jeremiah, and then he sees Methuselah. I think he might have bonked his head a little too hard.
Yeah.
He definitely seems concussed, and that makes me wonder what Methuselah actually is in Redux, considering everything Will went through.
Yep. And Castle is asking, so which version are we playing right now? And that would be Redux.
Redux. You can play Predux, I think, if you do the time capsule. If you go back far enough. Yeah, Redux is what I consider canon. I don't consider anything from Predux canon. There might be more details in that for certain things, like Grey Mother, like I said, she does provide more details about her relationship with Martin, her husband. And
yeah, so I'm gonna stop you, Toasty. They're saying the audio cut out.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if we're gonna get another drop from lovely Streamlabs here or not.
Mm-hmm. It can't be a Streamlabs podcast without that. Without technical difficulties.
It cannot.
Is Kirk here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay.
I'm trying to. I just got the error. It's they're experiencing a buffering issue. So let's see if it's going to die on us or not.
Okay.
Oh, and now the audio is good.
No audio's good. Okay. Which is weird.
It's caught back up.
You wouldn't think there'd be buffering issues when it's just a simple frame video. It's just the fire and the lighting that changes a little bit.
All right, so sorry to interrupt there, but please continue on.
Oh yeah, we could talk about Martin later, because even though some of that info isn't only in Predux, it never gets mentioned in the official version of the game. We could still speculate why Martin still why Grey Mother separated from him. But let's get to the actual start of the gameplay, which is after the plane crash. Were there any other questions before the audio cut out?
Casual Zach made a comment about, and this kind of ties into the beginning of the game, where you're taking play, is a question about the case being left behind. Mm-hmm. Why did Astrid leave the case behind?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, let's get to that then. So while they're having their conversation, they obviously get hit by the Aurora, the first flare, or the gray flare. A lot of people name it different things. The game actually never calls it anything specific. It just says the Aurora, when the Aurora first appeared. And then even on Black Frost, I think it says it's been a year since the Aurora's appearance. So there's no official name for it. I use first flare. I like that one, but some people use gray flare. So after the plane crash, they land near Milton. Astrid is lucky enough to remain in the plane while Will gets launched out, and that might lead to, you know, some trauma, physical trauma to the head. Who knows? And he lands safely, but is separated from Astrid. So they're in the middle of a blizzard. They just crash landed. There's going to be some whiplash, some confusion. I think in the whole, you know, emergency situation, Astrid's thinking she needs to find help because she can't find him. She has no idea where they are.
Well, I mean, even if she knows he's down in there, you got to think she's a woman, and he's like, you got to like climb up. There's no way she can get him back up herself. So the only thing she can really do is go look for help, and she leaves the hard case. I think that was intentional on her part because she intends to come back, and you can see that when you wake up as well. Just after leaving the plane, you can find cloth markers from her scarf, and you can go back to the first cutscene and see it's the same color as the scarf she's wearing. And even later, when Will runs into Hobbs, he has a piece of Astrid's scarf wrapped around his arm. So it's very recognizable scarf pieces left around. She was marking her path to hopefully help get Will some help. It's kind of because Will is a word that we use common in our language, so it's confusing. So sometimes you want to say will go to blank. That's why I think calling him Mackenzie is easier.
I would agree on that.
To get Mackenzie some help. So that's what the markers are for, and Will even reacts to them. He recognizes that it's part of her scarf. So I think that's proof that she was planning to go back. She didn't leave the hard case there or him there on purpose. She wanted to go back.
Hey, can I bring up a quick point while you're here?
Yeah.
Because I've noticed you've mentioned this, and I've seen this a lot too. Is that there's a lot of talk about how they feel like Astrid is out to kill Will, and I think what you're talking about here is the complete opposite. The fact that she was willing to leave that case behind and go get help was not a case for somebody you're trying to kill. It's completely the opposite. So again, going back to the very beginning of their discussions and all that stuff and the wearing of the rings, there's still a relationship there that's just broken through tragedy. I can see why some people would think that, and I did make a video where I talked about that in detail about the theory that Astrid tried to get him killed. And there are too many like things in the game, clues that tell us that is impossible. Because they're both still wearing the ring. They both still talk to each other like they need to catch up, and they need to get emotional with each other in order to fix whatever they're dealing with. They hold hands as the plane is crashing. Will trusted her despite the request, which is insane, what she was asking him to do. He trusted her to enough to go on this plane ride and take her to Great Bear Island. And I think the reason why she wasn't telling him what was in the case and all the secrecy was to protect him. She had done something illegal at that point.
When we get to episode 3, we'll talk about it. But what she has in the hard case is not her property. I'm speculating that she might have become a wanted person because she took it, because of where she took it from. We'll talk about it later, but I think she was on the run at that point. Not only risking her life, but the life of anyone that would help her.
Well, and the phone call that Mackenzie got before she arrived was obviously her trying to find him.
That was the secretary, I believe, telling him that that Astrid is coming over. So, and then the final thing about the whole Astrid wanting to kill him, the cloth markers are an indication that she meant to come back. So it's almost impossible for anyone to prove that she was trying to kill him. And then when we get to episode 3, we see that she is not giving us anything about that idea, about wanting to get rid of him. I don't think things led to that in their relationship.
And I think she still falls back on her Hippocratic oath of being a doctor to do no harm.
Yeah. And then we get to the gameplay, where we are now playing as Will. We arrive in Milton, we find the smoke, and we get introduced to Grey Mother. This is, I think, technically the third chapter of 4, but 90% of this episode is this chapter, the Grey Mother. And this is where the history of the collapse and Great Bear Island comes into play, because Will is introduced to this old timer who has lived her entire life on the island, and he's a mainlander. And knowing the history, those two don't really, work together. The mainlanders are seen as traitors by the islanders, and there's even kind of like a political division among the islanders, where some of them don't really like the mainlanders at all, and they want to see themselves as independents, and then others kind of still rely on them. And that leads into how they acquire their supplies, the formation of community gardens and stuff like that. But in general, the islanders despise mainlanders. And so her reaction is, besides shooting at him because she had just been robbed, her reaction is, she's very hesitant. She doesn't know what his game is, like what is he trying to get out of this. She, like any outsider, she would react the same way, more or less, minus the shooting, unless they're trying to break in. And so they kind of have to make a deal, because she needs help, he needs help, so they make the deal, and that's the only real way to like work together in a situation like this. They still don't know what's going on. They think it's just a power outage, which is, I think, why Will speculates so much what's actually happening up until later in episode 2, I think, when he finally understands what Jeremiah or what Methuselah's talking about. So yeah, they come up with a deal. She'll try to remember what she heard the night before. She is blind, but she's still very observant. She still has her hearing, and so she's able to hear things from outside. And he will get the supplies that she needs, which were taken from her when the convicts entered her home the night before. And that actually plays into what Astrid was dealing with in the night before. So this is actually the night after, or the day after the first flare. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because that's the part that I think everybody is talking about that's missing is the things that went on the night that Astrid got there, and the thing with the schoolhouse and the prisoners getting from the bus, and there's a lot of chaos going on that they don't show. It's more the mystery of piecing together what happened when Will gets back into town. Yeah, you need to piece it all together from what Grey Mother tells you later on, and then what Hobbs tells you. And then the actual world itself, like you go to the schoolhouse to see where Astrid was. You go to the collapsed tunnel, and actually, if you look at the episode 3 trailer from when they first announced it, you can see very brief glimpses of what Astrid saw. They, I guess, created that just for that specific reason for the trailer. But you could see her running down the streets in Milton in the blizzard. You can see her looking at Grey Mother's house. You can see her writing Perseverance on the bus, or in the inside of the bus, and then on the other side of the tunnel. So they create a very brief glimpse of what she went through. They didn't show the prisoners or anything like that. I don't know why. But it's like literally 2 seconds. It's rapid fire showing you what I call the Night of the Lights. But that's a phrase that Grey Mother uses. It's what she calls the first night, the first flare, essentially. But I usually use it to refer to the events that happened in Milton, because there are some pretty devastating things that happened there. Not just the first flare, but also the arrival of the convicts,
the collapsing of the tunnel, and then the eventual death of all the townspeople, at least most of them. It seems that some of them did get out, but that was before the convicts showed up, and then the only surviving member that stayed behind was Grey Mother. But yeah, the Night of the Lights is what I referred to that night, is the part of the game of episode 1 where you don't see it because it's all Astrid's perspective. It's kind of like the missing piece that you have to solve. You have to put it all together from playing as Will. Can I Toasty see this? What? That's oh boy. Yeah.
And Casual Zach
Mhm.
was saying something about he was convinced in his first playthrough that Grey Mother and Methuselah were actually Will and Astrid, and they were in a time loop. And this is something that I've seen other people talk about, and I know that I had that kind of belief too when I first played it. And watching some of Toastybits lore videos and stuff kind of twisted me the other way. And I think what gets
Yeah.
lost in translation with all that is if we don't realize that when we're running into Milton, we're seeing it at basically the precipice of the collapse of the world with the electricity and everything. The other parts of Milton that were already deteriorated have been happening over decades. And so when as a player, sometimes we compress things down. And so that's why I think we see this time dilation effect in the story. There could have been some other things that Hinterland could have done to help with that time dilation. I think one of the simple ones for me would have been is the schoolhouse should have been smoldering. There could have been some other clues. But if you don't read all the material, and if you haven't played the story, and this is coming from someone who has gone from one side to the other, read everything. Pick up every scrap of paper, read everything, and things will start to make more sense. And then by all means, go watch Toasty's videos. But anyway, I'm sorry, Toasty.
It's okay. Yeah, it's sort of like stepping back in time. And the characters are very, like I mentioned that before, some of the characters that they chose, like specific characteristics they have, the personalities, the things that they say, they're paired perfectly with the protagonists for specific reasons. Grey Mother, as you learn throughout episode 1, is a mirror image of Will. They are essentially the same person. They've gone through a tragic loss and a divorce, and all of the emotions that follow that. So Grey Mother is essentially supposed to be a lesson for Will. Like, he's seeing what he could potentially become one day in his loneliness and his sorrow. So they paired Grey Mother with Will for that specific reason, to kind of help Will build towards the realization that he needs to reconcile with Astrid. And they were kind of doing that at the beginning. He was trying to put them in that situation where they can actually talk it out and say the things that they needed to say. But Grey Mother kind of gives him that extra push towards that. And I think that's where it's going to end up going in episode 5 when they hopefully reunite. I would hope so. But it's very intentional. Some of these characters are in place in these episodes intentionally because they fit a specific role. Methuselah is the same, but not in a more, not in the same way as Grey Mother. I have my theories on Methuselah, and I've made a video on him, talking about him. There's something about Methuselah that I think a lot of people, it's kind of confusing because it does seem eerily similar to Will in some ways. Like, almost it's the same person, like the time travel thing. But yeah, stepping on to Great Bear Island, it's like literally traveling back in time. Not actually, but metaphorically. Technology is behind, but also there's some newer stuff. And so it could confuse some people into thinking, oh, did I just time travel? Is Grandmother Astrid and Methuselah's Will? Because they kind of are almost. Even you could also see Grandmother as being an equivalent to Astrid as well, because they're both going through the same thing. But Methuselah's a little different. And do you guys want me to share my theory in case people want to watch the video or they want to go through the game themselves?
Well, you do have one
'Cause I know
question
some people-
from
Yeah.
Mr. Stanford is saying, is Wintermute the word playing? Which the whole point of what we're talking about is to say yes, it is worth playing. And even if you play it on the simplest version where none of the wildlife bothers you and you just go through and read the story, it's worth playing on that aspect.
Beware though, I don't know if it's a bug, but when I did play episode 3 recently on whatever the lowest difficulty is called, for some reason the Timberwolves still attack. I think that's a bug, but they still attacked me. And as far as I know, they haven't fixed that. So you might have to deal with the Timberwolves in episode 3. But in episode 4, I think, yeah, did you play episode 4 as well and then get to that with the lowest difficulty?
Yeah, I got through all of them. And I don't remember having any difficulties with anything, but...
Did you have to deal with Timberwolves at all, Kirk?
No.
Weird. So it must have been a bug.
It had to have been. You can, and I'm going to throw this at you, and if you want to share your opinion about Methuselah. You were talking about in the original story, he doesn't show up until Will hits his head. But in some cases, we could also say that maybe he's still suffering from a concussion because he did fly out of a plane into the ravine, and he's under trauma because his hand is still probably feeling the pain too. So food for thought.
Yeah. There's no.
Your theory that there's an additional machine in Perseverance Mills or by Perseverance Mills. So I almost wonder if we're seeing hallucinations and that sort of thing, like we did see, in the notes with Rudiger's machine. So I almost wonder if that can account for some of the abnormalities we're seeing as well.
There's certainly evidence of that, even like as far away as Milton, because people are crazy on Great Bear Island. Just living there, just living on the island at this point. You've got to be a little crazy in order to stay here. So maybe there has been a machine on the island active for who knows how long, and it has an effect on everyone, whether it's very minor or not.
Well, I mean, I think you can even see it in Sutherland too when you're talking to him on the radio, because he's like, was that yesterday or tomorrow or when was that? Like, he's all mixed up too.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll leave the Methuselah speculation to you guys because I don't want to spoil too much on what I believe, my theory.
And we can link everything that Toasty's talking about in the either comments or the description, so you guys can find that stuff easy enough.
Just pay attention to what Methuselah says and does, because that's really important for figuring out what he is. And I don't know if they ever intended to bring him back because he's just gone in episode 4. And I don't know what the original plan was for him in Pre-Ducks Wintermute, because obviously never made Pre-Ducks episode 3 and 4. Those didn't exist. I'm guessing there was a full story rewrite after a certain point. So who knows what Methuselah's role was supposed to be originally. It wasn't even the same voice actor even back then. It was a different one.
And God knows Mackenzie got enough head blows during those scenes to have more concussion.
Yeah, quite a few hits to the head throughout the whole storyline so far. Yeah, we could just kind of go through quickly what's left, but in just finishing up episode 1, after he gets all the supplies for Grandmother, Will returns and she kind of tells him that she did hear something, that it was a woman, and that kind of leads him on a wild goose chase to see if he can track down Astrid. That takes him to the tunnel. The tunnel is collapsed and he could see the word Perseverance on it. And like I said, you can see that at the beginning of the episode 3 trailer. You can see her writing Perseverance. And then that gives a Grey Mother an opportunity to try to help him a little bit more, because it's a familiar word to her. And of course that leads her to Perseverance Mills, which is a town that, similar to Milton, has been kind of forgotten and destroyed by not only the collapse, but Great Barrelland's own collapse as well. At this point, I'm kind of trying to summarize this. We should get up to episode 2 as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And I do want to give people opportunities to
Ask
questions.
Yeah.
So after that, she kind of has this like weird epiphany moment. And I did notice that throughout episode 1, there are moments where Grey Mother is kind of confusing. When she's talking about Astrid, she's actually confusing those moments for what happened to her and Lily, her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
When Will asks why didn't people help her, he's talking about Astrid, and then she confusingly says, yeah, why didn't they help her? And she gets really emotional because I think she's remembering her daughter Lily.
Yeah.
It's a repressed memory that she's trying to block, which isn't healthy. But in order to help Will, she needs to unblock that. And so she remembers the safety deposit box, which is over at the bank. Well, it's at the bank, technically, the credit union. But she needs to get the key from her former husband, Martin. She never mentions him directly as former husband or anything like that. That was in Predex, which I thought was interesting that they cut it out. But I think you can conclude that they were together at some point, that she lived over there at the Paradise Meadows farm. And then after Lily's passing, they would separate. But you can actually find her former husband dead, both in Wintermute and survival mode, which I find very interesting. It's one of the few consistent corpses. It's not in the same spot usually, but Martin's almost always there in both modes.
Well, that's interesting. I never noticed that.
Yeah, you can find Martin if the key's on the corpse in survival mode for the house. It's on Martin's body. It's the same body.
Oh wow.
And then when Will goes inside to get the key for the credit union, he runs into Hobbs, and Hobbs is who tells Will everything that happened to Astrid. So he reveals the other half, the missing piece of the puzzle for what happened to Astrid, that she ran into them. They had locked everyone inside this schoolhouse. They didn't have any intention to kill them, I'm assuming, but this is where I believe there were actually multiple auroras during the Night of the Lights, as Grey Mother called it. Maybe that's why it's called Night of the Lights, plural, because I think there are multiple auroras during that night, because all of a sudden there's a electrical fire that gets sparked and the schoolhouse is engulfed in flames, and that's where everyone dies there.
And they were gathered there to stay warm because it was one of the few places that still had a heater.
The convicts.
Oh, did they actually gather them there? Yeah, I had seen something where they had where they were there.
They would, yeah. Grey Mother says any travelers would normally spend the night there because it would be the warmest place.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was thinking.
But yeah, I think what Hobbs tells us, that when he tells how the schoolhouse catches on fire, I believe that means there were multiple auroras. But I'm not sure. That's why I usually use plural for that night. There was multiple auroras. Not just the one. And then, you're left to decide Hobbs's fate, and that doesn't have an effect on the game, but it does have an effect on the dialogue with Methuselah, which I find very weird. So that's one of those things that makes me believe what I believe about Methuselah. It's rather strange how he knows the results of that action. And I kind of wish they would do more things like that, or would have done more things like that in this game, but I just don't think they planned very well what they were going to do with Methuselah. I'm not sure. If he returns on episode 5, that'd be interesting. And you should also pay attention to who reacts to Methuselah's existence. Because so far only Will has seen him. And Grey Mother doesn't recognize him from a description.
Remember him by description, yeah.
So yeah, if he does return, pay attention to who interacts with him, who observes him. Fast forward, he gets the key and then gets the pearls, which are in the safety deposit box, and that kind of opens up Grey Mother's memory. Because her memory, she's probably suffering from dementia. I don't think she's suffering from anything machine related. That's still up in the air. Who knows? But that memory has been unlocked, and she remembers everything about her daughter, her passing, and all the climbing gear. But Will still doesn't fully understand, and I don't know why this was optional. I feel like it should have been a requirement for the story. But Will could have just left. You could have just left there and left Grey Mother with the pearl. Well, I think technically she gives you the pearls, but you could leave with the pearls and just move on. But she gives you the option to go to the graveyard and find Lily and give her the pearls. And so that would help you understand who Lily was and what happened to her. And that would give, the really heartbreaking conversation with Grey Mother about the loss of her daughter and how losing a child is like losing yourself. And even Will kind of responds to that and knows and understands that feeling. So that's where you kind of see how they're mirror images of each other. They've gone through the exact same thing, almost step by step.
Yeah.
And this is Will's chance to kind of make up for that and not follow Grey Mother's path.
Yeah.
I still don't know why that was optional. It should have been part of the main story. It should have been a requirement to do, but you can leave without doing that, and that's kind of defeats the purpose of even helping Grey Mother, because you don't really truly understand her or her situation.
That should have been part of her closure.
And you miss out a huge part of what's going on with Will in his past.
Because I think it kind of brought closure for her and him in some aspects.
Yeah. So yeah, they would eventually depart, regardless if you deliver the pearls or not, and then he leaves with Lily's climbing gear, but it's a little old. I'm guessing it's probably decades old because the rope breaks, but he does make it down safely. And again, he falls.
Heartbreaking to me.
Yeah, he does.
He's like, I'm gonna come back for you, but then the rope breaks. It's like, how are you gonna do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then again, he falls and potentially hits his head. Who knows? We can't really tell like how many times this guy's taken hits to his skull. And then
He's a good neurologist.
Down below. Remember, Methuselah is old, rather old. I think older than Grey Mother, and he's down below the rope climb, just hanging out.
Yep.
Yeah, the conversations with Methuselah are really confusing, but most of what he's telling you in all of the different dialogue conversations you have with him are is that whatever's happening is not just a power outage. There is more to it. There's more to than just the lights. There's more to the wildlife, behaving a little differently. And the game also does tell you it's specifically not about a religious apocalypse, even though Methuselah's name has religious context.
Mm-hmm.
He's talking about redemption, and that word also has religious context as well. But what I think he's talking about is that he's specifically saying that everyone's going to be paying for their sins through redemption, which I was always confused about. What does that mean? How do you pay through your sins through redemption? I think I might be misremembering because my mind is cloudy right now.
Yeah, we have to remember you're doing the best you can for not feeling well.
That this apocalypse is not about religion, it's about redemption. And mankind is paying for its sins. You can take that however you want, but I
it kind
it's
of
it's
has
hard
more
to
of a
it's hard to decipher.
political. Yeah, it's kind of got a political connotation to it in the sense that we're paying for the
Hmm.
sins of plundering the planet, maybe, or what have you.
Yeah,
Which is kind
there's
of how
certainly he's
the
talking about
island and the
Mother
mainland
Nature.
treat each other,
Hmm.
kind of thing. They look at
Yeah,
the mainlanders as plunderers.
yeah, he does talk about Mother Nature when he's talking about that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to decipher all that. I've done the math on that in that one video specifically about Methuselah. So if you want to watch that one, you can. And then jumping forward, we gotta speed this up. But do you guys want to take a
Yeah.
quick sec to check the comments?
Yeah,
Chit
for
chat.
sure. So Gray is saying over the last week and a half, I've been going through Wintermute, and getting all the achievements for it. I just beat it yesterday. Well, that's great, Gray.
Yeah.
That's
But,
awesome.
yeah. Congratulations. I hope you liked it. And Gray is also saying, I hope episode 5 of Wintermute comes out this year. Do you think we'll get a new map for survival mode?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Raphael has already. It was a while ago when he confirmed it, but they're not looking at getting the new map or maps. I think he mentioned plural.
Yeah,
survival
I mean,
mode.
you got to think Wintermute and survival are essentially two different games, so it's not a simple process to port
Mhm.
things between one and the other. That's why we don't see any of the new survival updates in Wintermute. Like, there's no insulated glass, there's no does, because it costs a lot of money to transfer things.
Yeah.
So I hope we
It'll-
do, but
It'll probably come out this year. I can't
Mhm.
see them going a full year without an update. It'll, I think ideally in the summer, but if they take their time with it, I honestly wasn't seeing, because I was under the impression they were just going to get it out ASAP, like early 2025.
yeah.
What I thought was a 3-month delay would potentially be a year delay, which makes me a little scared for where it is in terms of quality. Like, how bad is it?
Mhm.
How big is episode 5 if it's been 2 years of trying to get it out? No, I
Yeah.
think 3 years at this point. If they do release it in December of this year, then 3 years since the initial delay.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
I'm
it should have been out in 2023 at the end. That was the original plan. But then they, with the expansion, that didn't happen. No, it would be 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
just want to go ahead. Sorry.
Hello, Silent Shade. Just wanted to say hi. And I just joined and heard Methuselah. I recall when I stole his rabbit and was unexpectedly cursed with food poisoning. Oh no.
Wait, is that a thing? If you take his rabbit, do you get food poisoning?
I don't know. I've never tried it before.
Oh,
I should try.
no.
We'll have
Yeah.
to try that now. We'll
We
have to
have to
go
test this.
confirm.
Yep. Yeah, I want to speed things up so that we can take questions and then people can ask about side quests and stuff like that if they want.
Yeah.
Well, episode 2 is actually what I think the worst episode so far because it is filler based. It's just a filler
Yeah.
episode. They could have condensed it with episode 1 easily. Or like the first half of episode 1 was Grandmother, and then the second half is helping with Jeremiah. So yeah, you finally make your way out of Milton. You go through that cave and you enter Mystery Lake area, and you run into the Trapper. By the way, it is never stated what his name is. It's just the Trapper, and then at the very end, Will just suddenly knows it's Jeremiah. And I think that's a remnant of Redux, where the script, had him learn his name at some point, and they just never fixed that. I think his rifle does mention that his name is etched on it, but Will doesn't recognize that or react to that or anything like that. And again, the whole fix the rifle got changed to fix the spear or find the spear and fix it. So yeah, it's kind of confusing how Will knows his name, but yeah, he saves the Trapper, gives him medical attention, and then tells him he needs better medical attention, better medicines, because he will be in trouble because of the injuries from the bear. And then throughout the conversations they have, he learns about the bear, how it's special. Jeremiah has a history with the bear, and tells him to be careful. So he tells him to take the rifle and go to Carter Dam, which is really concerning when you know the history of Carter Dam and how long it's been closed and how old the medicine would be. I don't think it would work.
Yeah.
It's about 3 decades old if the timing of Wintermute is correct, from how I understand it. It's 3 decades old. I don't know how that medicine would work, but he finds medicine and radio parts and gets back to the trapper. Almost runs into the bear, just barely escapes the bear, and then gets back with the medicine and the radio parts. The second chapter is where I think is the biggest chunk of that episode, is learning about the bears, the old bear, the demon bear story, and the origin of the spear. And while he's trying to fix up the radio, and fails at doing that, Jeremiah tells Will about this story. I don't think that was in Redux. I'm not sure. Elijah's
I don't remember that at all.
Asking about Redux stuff. Yeah, the survival school is missing. That's one of the key differences. Yeah, there's a lot of differences in this episode from Predux and Redux. Just looking at the chat. Must have mumbled his name off camera. I think I remember when I watched the movie for Predux, all the cutscenes and dialogue, he does say his name. And I think I have the wiki opened up. Jeremiah's broken rifle, which is what you would have in Predux. Maybe not. It says Jeremiah's broken rifle. That's like the flavor text. So that means he does tell him his name when they first meet, but not in Redux. It's like a little plot hole they created there by accident by not fixing the script. Looking at the chat here. The old bear is a nice bear. I wouldn't agree with that.
And Castle is asking, is Demon Bear and Old Bear the same entity?
No, I would hope not, because that would be rather disturbing. The Demon Bear is from the Bear and the Spear story that Jeremiah tells you.
That's like in the late 1800s, right?
Yes, yeah, late 1800s, because that's 150 years prior. And the old bear is the one that Jeremiah is facing. So he's using that legend to find a way to get rid of this old bear, the current bear, not old bear, but the current bear that they're fighting, because seems to not like bullets, not really care for them. The whole premise of this episode is just get rid of the bear in order to get to surviving. They can't survive with the bear around, so they need to get rid of it. So that leads Will to go find the spear and fix it instead of fixing the rifle. Oh yeah, just welcome. I am sick. I've been very sick all week, and I'm barely getting better over the last day. Thank you for asking. Yeah. Where are we? We're in finding the spear.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to travel a few days south, according to Jeremiah, which is very interesting when you look at the map. A few days south to find the supposed location of the spear. And on his way, he gets interrupted by the bear. The bear, Will's in a train, and he gets pushed over by the bear, and that knocks him out. Again, another bonk to the head.
Another head trauma.
Yeah, that's like the fourth one at this point, I think. Third or fourth. And there's more coming. Believe me, there's more coming later.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then he wakes up in this moment where I think it's the first aurora since the night of the first flare, because the episode is called Luminance Fugue, which is very interesting. Luminance deals with light. It means it has to do with light. And fugue, if you look at it through like I forgot what the term would be.
Like a fugue state.
Yeah, I don't know what that would be considered, like what studies. I guess like when you look at the brain, a fugue state is where your body is kind of doing things you're not aware of. So a fugue state for the auroras would mean that this is the first aurora since the first one, or first ones. Because I do believe there's plural. There's more than one. The first night. So Will finally gets to see the effects of the aurora, and even runs into Methuselah later on, which is again another confusing moment. Like, how does this old man not gotten eaten by this point?
Yeah.
Dealing with aurora wolves and bears and who knows what else is lurking around the corner. And yeah, that's the moment when Will and Methuselah talk under the aurora lights. That's when Will realizes there is more to these auroras and the effects that have, you know, been left behind by them and the animals and all that. That it's not just power outage. It is having an effect on the world in general. Or the auroras, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there he finds the spear, fixes it, and moves on. Comes back through the muskeg. Everything seems fine. Like there's no obstacles until you run into the bear again, but that's just, you know, the bear lurking. And then you come back, arrive with the spear, and Jeremiah is pleased to see that it was real, because he didn't think it was real, I think, at first.
Send us off on a fool's errand.
Yeah.
2 days south.
Yeah, because it could have potentially not have been there. It could have been moved at some point. And again, I think I mentioned it last time, the Forest Talkers' home base was at that lodge.
Mm-hmm.
So they could have potentially taken it, moved it, or thrown it away or whatever. So there's no knowing if it was there. It was a gamble that they had to take, and they fortunately succeeded. That would then give Will a chance to do a very major task for Jeremiah, because he's still recovering. And the night of that first, the next aurora, the one that happened when Will was unconscious, Jeremiah would see that and learn that the radio does work, but they need power, and the power's coming from the aurora. So Will would need to go find special parts to boost the signal, and that's when he would go back into the muskeg with the spear and acquire those parts. And Jeremiah really needs to get, he mentions this a few times, but he needs to get a message out, and we learn more about that later, but it's really important for him. But Will doesn't understand why he should be helping him if he needs to go find Astrid. Like, he doesn't understand the gravity of the situation. So Jeremiah tells him, kind of, you know, with a little bit of rage, that there's more at stake here, that he needs to get this message out, and he promises if he helps that he will be able to contact Perseverance Mills as his reward, I guess. So yeah, we're kind of picking up a little bit here and there from Methuselah and Jeremiah that these auroras are unusual. There's something else going on. I think the game gives you pieces that together over time. Even episode 4, there's some pretty big info drops there about the auroras. Yeah, at that point we're getting to like the very end. Will goes into the muskeg, acquires the parts. The bear makes its move, and you know, I think you can attack the bear multiple times, but once you grab that last part, it kind of locks you in. it'll charge you and then drag you to its den, and then you fight it in its den. It somehow separates you from all your loot. I don't know how that works.
Mm-hmm.
It would make sense if it was separated from the spear, but how did it take your backpack off? That's kind of odd.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, you fight the bear. And when Will puts the bear down, he does have that moment of where he asks for forgiveness because he has to do what he has to do in order to survive. And I think that does kind of play into the whole redemption thing for that Methuselah mentions. Like I lost it. I'm
That's
sorry.
fine. No, that's fine.
Because because he does something that he would never do in a normal circumstances, but this is an extraordinary circumstance, and so he needs to tell the bear in its final moments, "I'm sorry, I have to do this," because he's kind of forced to do it, in order to survive.
Unlike Hobbes, where Hobbes was someone that was evil and he felt the need to either do something or not, the bear was just being a bear, and it wasn't his fault.
Yeah, can't fight your nature, essentially. After that, we get to the final one. I would say one of the more important cutscenes in the whole game. It's just unfortunately in an episode that is it's very much built to be filler. But you get the radio working after Will arrives, obviously. Will collapses, but Jeremiah is able to grab the parts off of him, fixes the radio, and Will is able to contact Perseverance Mills. And he picks up a signal from someone that is from there, and they're asking for help. But they're not asking Will for help. And if you go through episode 3, Astrid's actually listening on the exact same call on the radio. And she's not the one that's being asked for help. Someone else is being asked for help. So there's someone else out there trying to contact Perseverance Mills. Or at least they picked up the call first. But they can hear Perseverance Mills. But Perseverance Mills can't hear them. And that reveals that Perseverance Mills is in lockdown. Or quarantine, I think, is what they say specifically. And that they really need help. Those are some of our first hints as to what is happening there, because we know that Astrid's trying to get there, and she had that case that Will now has. So we can start piecing together the situation there, what the hard case might be. And that'll get explained more in episode 3. And then unfortunately the radio blows up, and that prevents Jeremiah from doing what he needed to do. The whole reason why he needed the radio is because he needed to get a message out to someone, and Will didn't understand why it was so important. And I think that's kind of part of the mystery of behind Jeremiah and Atwood, is we don't understand what this message is and why it's so important and how they know each other. But he tells them to deliver Wintermute to Atwood. And we still don't know what that means, but I'm sure we will. And I think a lot of people have their theories on it. I do. But from there, Will just needs to keep going. And with the bear out of the way, he can do it, without restrictions. And Jeremiah begs him to go send this message, because he's the only one that can do it, because Jeremiah's still injured and he needs time to heal. So he tells him to go through Carter, and then from there he would go to Signal Hill, which is the path we would take if we went from Mystery Lake to Pleasant Valley. It's more or less like if we're going from Carter to Signal Hill. And then from there, Will should be able to go to Perseverance Mills, indicating that the road that's blocked by an avalanche should head to Perseverance Mills, at least in the correct direction. but that is unfortunately blocked. So Jeremiah didn't know about that, actually, because that, I think, is something that happens right before the first flare. And I imagine the word, the news getting around the island doesn't exactly reach his ears. So I think it makes sense why he thinks it would take him there. But unfortunately, before Will gets through the dam, well, he runs into Methuselah again for the last time, but he doesn't tell him anything new. I think it's just like a point where Methuselah's telling you, hey, this is the point of no return. Go finish up any side stories or whatever before you move on. I don't know why they put him there at all to begin with. It doesn't make sense. But he's just there to tell you this is the point of no return for episode 2. And then in the dam, you have to go through during an aurora, turn on the elevator, go around the obstacles, and you run into another hit to the head. It's like on the bingo card like 5 times now at this point.
Yeah.
This is where he runs into Mathis, the one of the escaped convicts from Milton. He was on the Pleasant Valley side of the tunnel, so he got lucky. He didn't have to go through Milton. He essentially kidnaps Will and tells him, you know, certain things that kind of scare Will. He mentions that he had previously run into a woman in the dam, which scares Will because it could have been Astrid. He doesn't know, and that leads into the start of episode 4, why he asks them this, like, please clarify, who did you run into in the dam? But before he even tells him in the dam, like, what he was going to do to him, he just kind of knocks him out. Because I think when he was unconscious, he looked at his ID, and so he saw he was a pilot. So he had plans cooking, and that's where that ends, more or less. Yeah, episode 2's just a lot of filler. Could have done without the bear and the spear part, honestly.
Yeah,
because really the highlights are the thing with the
final
radio
cutscene.
and Jeremiah and the thing with Mathis.
Yeah, I think I definitely prefer the Predux version of the old bear. I'm not sure how I felt about, like, the cave. It just felt like, I mean, it's really cool, but it also takes a lot longer than it necessarily needs to.
I think that wraps up episode 1 and 2. I think I did speedrun 2, but hopefully that covers most of it.
Yeah.
Now we can take as many questions as you two would like to take for the remainder of the podcast.
And then the
For
other
sure.
reason, just to give everybody some clarity too, is why we combined 1 and 2 together. Is because 2 is really kind of short and sweet, and the way our schedule works is that we get 3 Saturdays in a row, and then we have to do the Sunday show. We wanted to make sure we were in our prime time thing to cover all the episodes in a row. So we discussed it behind the scenes and figured we could cover both 1 and 2 in one podcast, even if we're running a little late. So any questions or anything? I know I've got a couple if nobody else does.
Yeah, and then for the next 2 podcasts, we're only covering 1 episode at a time, so
Yeah.
we
we'll
don't
have
need to
more
rush
time.
episode 3 and 4. Those 2 I think are more important and they're bigger. They certainly got a little bit more ambitious with those 2 episodes.
More story in those too.
A lot more story.
Yeah.
I think because at that point they had rewritten everything and knew what they were going to do for the end.
Yep. And also for chat too, if you asked a question earlier on and we didn't see it or we didn't get to it, feel free to repost it as well, and we'll definitely get to it now.
Okay, here
Castle's
is
got
this
one.
from Castle. I'm very curious on episode 2 in the cabins. The person locked up, is that a Forest Talker member? Yes. So that is the Lake Gunshots side quest. So that originates from the maintenance yard. If you find a note there, it tells you about the Forest Talkers. I think it says Forest Talkers, but I'm not sure. That they had stolen some documents from Briarhouse, and Briarhouse and the Forest Talkers have been going at it for a while. before soccer sabotaging Briar House and the maintenance yard and their trucks and all that. That's mentioned in the lore for the buffer memories of the Broken Railroad. The note in Wintermute kind of starts it all, and that actually, I think the note is written before the first flare, so that tells you that Briar House is still open at that point, which is interesting. So that's like almost a confirmation for how long that company ran. It ran until the very end of the world, essentially. So the employees are tasked to go retrieve the documents that were stolen. So I think it even mentions they hadn't been paid for a while, so they need to do this because, you know, a lot is at stake. And then they track them down all the way to Mystery Lake and have a little shootout, I guess, because I think one of the Briar House employees is killed, and then the Forest Stalker member is injured. And then depending on how you end it, because you have a choice at the end, do you take the ammo or do you leave it? You take the ammo, the Briar House member kills the Forest Stalker member. And if you leave the ammo, the Forest Stalker member survives, I guess. So yeah, that's just kind of like a few employees being sent out to track down the Forest Stalkers that stole the documents, and that runs into the Quiet Apocalypse even, which shows you how dedicated those employees are. And they have no idea what's actually going on. They don't realize that we're in the end times, and they're still out there working as if they were working with Briar House for money that they hadn't been paid for months. And the documents are really important because it shows that Briar House is cutting trees illegally in Mystery Lake. And so that would be the fuel that they need to take the company down. And so they don't want them to have those documents. Yeah, and then, like I said, you have the option to decide the fate of that Forest Stalker member by selecting what happens to their ammo in the bag, which is with the documents.
Very
Anything else
interesting.
there?
And then Elijah's got like a follow-up to what we're talking about with Briar House, and he's
Yeah.
asking if it was a logging corporation.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, and it had operations in a few areas of the island. I think you can even see a Briar House truck at the airfield as well.
And then I'll be the one. Could Toasty speculate on how Predux would be different than what we have now?
I don't know, because I don't know what they were going for in the story. Because as far as I can remember, I don't remember. Because I did skim through the movie. There's an upload of a movie length like compilation of all the cutscenes and dialogue from Predux. I didn't watch through the whole thing. I skimmed through it, trying to find some important details. I don't know if it ever mentions what's happening at Perseverance Mills. If it doesn't talk about that, I don't think I think the story might have diverted in a completely different direction from what it was originally going to be.
I think you sent me that link, and I did watch through all of it. And the biggest differences I noticed, obviously, was the fact that they had made Will a third-person character, which I thought was kind of funny because they must have spent a fortune on that. But the Grey Mother story was more detailed, and of course the thing with the rifle and all that stuff. But I don't remember there being much talk about what was going to happen next, and I think there was a lot of vagueness in that because they, that's part of the story. You're trying to find out what's going on.
Yeah, there was no radio call because the radio didn't appear until after Will left.
Yeah,
so they didn't even have any clue as to what's happening with Perseverance Mills. I think Grey Mother does mention Perseverance Mills, but that radio call doesn't happen. So I think we lost someone.
Yeah,
we definitely lost someone. Yeah.
I'll get her back.
yeah, if we don't have that, without that cutscene with the radio call, then I just don't think there's no way to tell where they were going originally. But I have no idea.
And it kind of depends on how.
It definitely has to do with whatever's. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it kind of depends too. How much of the story did they have pre-written? You know,
Yeah,
they were doing
were
this.
they writing
kinda,
episode by episode, or
Yeah.
did they write the whole thing beforehand?
Did they have like a storyboard like you would see in a movie where they were like, okay, this is where we start and this is where we're leading to. So all that's still, you know, you're not there in the studio, so you don't know.
Yeah, I would hope they had a rough outline before they even released the first episode.
All right, Joe, are you back?
Who knows? I think I'm. There's a question here about Sutherland from Castle.
Mhm.
Is Sutherland meant for Wintermute as well, given how he tells you that night all the screaming and fear, people running? I don't recall the people running part, but I do remember him saying that he heard things in the distance. I'm assuming from the coast because he's out in the water. I did, in my Sutherland Tale videos, I did talk about how he might be providing some hints as to what is happening in Wintermute, because he's apparently out in the water all the time, and he's riding along the coast of the island since the first flare. So I don't know. He even says he has a theory about what happened to everyone, and I do think that that might be a hint as to what actually happens to everyone, why it seems like everyone's gone. But yeah, Sutherland is a bit of a strange connection to Wintermute and survival mode, because he wasn't planned originally. I'm assuming that was a surprise drop. I mean, we knew there was going to be an NPC, but we didn't know he was going to have lore and story tied to him. So he's like one of those things that connects Wintermute and survival mode, because he does talk about Tom Joplin, which is a character from Wintermute that is also brought up in survival mode through the buffer memories and Sutherland's Tale. And also he does throw out a couple hints as to maybe what's happening in Wintermute because of the things he's hearing from the distance. But yeah, we'll see if he comes up, but I don't think he'll come up. I think maybe his dialogue will make a little sense, like the details he provides for those first, the first nights or days or whatever after the first flare. Whatever he talked about in regard to that might make more sense once we get to episode 5.
And then depending on where he was at the moment when all this happened, he's piecing this together like everybody else. When you're in a remote area like that, you may not understand that the world is coming to an end right away because the news is not there. So is this local or is this, everywhere? So we take time to piece that together.
Silent Shade asked, do we ever get solid info on who Jeremiah is actually before he went solo recluse in the woods? Like military background related to Atwood? No. We still don't know anything concrete. But I think most people do believe he has military background. Will points out several times how he has military grade, possessions. So I think there's no doubt he has some military experience, or maybe even a connection to the military. I'm not sure. And as far as for Atwood, his connection to the military might have something to do with Atwood. So,
do we even really know who Atwood is yet, or
no?
No.
We just know she's a astrophysics professor.
And that's it.
That's it. And she works at Suzuki Radio Telescope. So that's a former government facility, which might mean that she worked for the government previously, but it's former, so we don't really know. But yeah, I think their connection definitely has to do with his military background. and her potential connection to the government, considering she works at a former government facility. That's all we know. We don't have anything concrete. Really, the best connection or the best clues, the most concrete information we've gotten so far is from Jace, I think, telling us who Atwood is and what she does, and that kind of helps a little bit figure out how she knows Jeremiah. Curious what happens with Jeremiah after Mackenzie leaves. Jeremiah did say that he had something to take care of, a personal matter. And I do believe that is a reference to, you could consider it an Easter egg, even though it's in the same game. It's a reference to the Predux Aurora Hatch quest, which originally it was a prepper cache that belonged to Jeremiah. And he tells you, once you gain max trust, I think, with him, because that had the old trust system, he asks you to please go burn these letters in the prepper cache, and it requires a code to get in, because it has a lock tied to it, and that, which is why it's called the Aurora Hatch. But that's not in Redux. They cut that out. You can still go in the Aurora Hatch, but it doesn't have the notes or anything like that, and it has no connection to Jeremiah anymore. So I think that's what Jeremiah's personal matter is from the end of Redux episode 2. Once he gets better, he's gonna go handle his personal matter. It's just, I think it's a reference to what happens with the Aurora Hatch. He's gonna go take care of something that he needs to do instead of having Will do it.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. And that also does leave the possibility of him returning in episode 5. Because he knows about Atwood, he knows about Wintermute, he knows about Will's journey to that direction at the very least.
Yeah.
So he might pop up. Who knows? That's the one character I do believe might return. Besides the obvious, Will, Astrid, Jace, and Mathis.
So Elijah's asking, do you think Jeremiah's name has part of why he's named Jeremiah, or is it just cuz name? I guess that's a good question, because that's also kind of a religious name as well.
Yeah, it is. I don't know if you could with names in any story, you could always look at the religious context to them, especially if some religious stuff going on. Like Methuselah is a biblical name, but what he's talking about is not biblical in nature. Methuselah means I forgot what it I don't remember what the name means, but it's the name of the oldest living human in the Bible.
Yes.
Jeremiah is means God will uplift or appointed by God. Oh, that's an AI response. Yikes. But yeah, like Jeremiah is a biblical name. It could have biblical context for his character, but I don't think Jeremiah's character really, tells us that. Methuselah's definitely does, and his appearance does kind of fit along with the idea of him being named after the oldest human in the Bible, because he's really old, and he's wearing I think. Now I want to look up his name again. Methuselah's.
Well, I know there's also a Methuselah tree, and then also the oldest star in the universe is also named Methuselah as well. So there's a lot of a lot of conclusions you can draw.
His name has a specific meaning. His death shall send, or man of the javelin, or death of sword. It, who knows what these phrases mean.
Yeah, Elijah is saying the Jeremiah in the Bible was a prophet warning about Jerusalem's downfall from Babylon.
Ah, okay. So that actually kind of fits with this Jeremiah. Because he has a warning message for Atwood that he needs to deliver. But he has Will do it.
That's very interesting.
That's very interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing that about Methuselah that's really interesting is he has a symbol on his shirt or his sweater it's the Omega symbol, which I think in is it the Hebrew language? I don't remember. It's in the wiki. Means God. I think. I can't spell. Methuselah.
I think I've heard of a Bible verse that says something about "I am the Omega," something
Yeah.
along that lines.
Omega
I don't
is
know.
a
I don't
symbol
know
for-
the scriptures well enough to quote it, verse, but I think
Here it
I've heard
is.
that.
This is why I like the wiki, because they sometimes leave trivia facts here, so that helps with this stuff. So if you look at these glasses, it shows radiant fractures, which means that it's made of glass, which is old, like really old,
Mhm.
decades old. That's how you know it's playing along with his name, kind of. And then where is it? Here it is. Methuselah sure has an Omega symbol on it. This is an Abrahamic, that's what it is. Reference to God. It also means the end, as Omega is the last character in the Greek alphabet. There we go.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
Castle was just saying what I was saying. I couldn't remember the whole thing, but he says, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end."
Yeah. So you could see Methuselah as kind of like God, but I wouldn't take it exactly as that, like not literally. Yeah, and that's very interesting, that revelation about Jeremiah. I didn't think about that. I can't think of any other names in the game that might... Is Mathis? I don't think Mathis is biblical, right? I would hope not. It could be a play on an older word, like Matthias or something.
Yeah.
Matthew, even.
Yeah.
It would probably be Matthew then. If I had to guess. Or Matthias. Well, Matthew means gift of God. So let's maybe close that tab.
Mathis
Knowing
is
him.
definitely not that.
No, definitely not.
So Castle is asking, isn't there a lore note that talks about a man who could be seen and disappeared without making a sound or leaving a trail, or did I make that up?
In game?
Yeah.
Or in the Bible?
I think in game.
I don't remember that. You'd have to find it. It would be on the wiki. How far back was that comment? There it is.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't recall that at all. How long did you guys want to go? Because I think it's been an hour and a half.
Yeah, we're right at
it's
an hour
been
and
a
half.
while.
But
Yeah.
I was trying to
and I know you're not
letting
feeling
chat
well.
direct us, and it's quieted down a bit. So if we want to wrap up, that's fine with me.
Yeah. And we could talk more about like side quests in the next one, because we should have more time, hopefully, to cover everything.
Yeah, because we're not doing two stories back to back. We'll have a little more time for this stuff and everything.
Yeah.
But with that, Toasty, thank you for braving through all this.
Yeah, thank you.
By all
welcome.
means. And this has been fascinating and enjoyable. And we look forward to seeing you next Saturday, where we can continue the story.
Yep. Can you please link that that movie that
Yep.
I sent you? I forgot the name of the channel, but the link will take you to the channel. It's like a smaller content creator. So
Yep.
yeah, it's interesting to check out. Go check out that Predux movie that someone put together.
Yeah, we'll add all those
Yeah.
links in. And for what it's worth, if you guys go onto our main channel page, we've added a little segment in there called Creators Corner. And basically anybody who's been a guest on the show, their link to their channels will be there. So if you go to Toasty's channel from there, you can go through his playlist and you'll find all that stuff. And I'm sorry, go ahead, Jetware.
No, I was just saying, yeah, I have all the links and everything saved for a pinned comment. So after, I think it takes a couple minutes for the show to like render, and then I can put a pinned comment in. So just wait like 5 minutes and then it should be there. But
And not that you haven't had everything to say. If there's anything last things you want to say, Toasty, then we'll close out and call it a day.
No, I think that's good for now. We can.
Okay. So we'll pick
Continue
up
next
episode. We'll pick up episode 3 next week, and go through that one. Like I said, we'll probably have more time. We can even entertain some questions from this episode too, if you have any. And if you have any questions and you're listening to this after the fact, leave comments. We will get to you. Appreciate that.
Yep.
And with that, Jetwire.
Yep. Thank you all so very much for joining us. We really appreciate it, and we hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.